This is Singapore, a tiny dot on the map, but one of the richest and most advanced societies on the planet. To many, it's the ultimate success story. In just a few decades, it went from a struggling former colony to one of the world's most powerful economies, glittering skyscrapers, spotless streets, and a reputation for stability and innovation. Singapore has become a symbol of what determined leadership and strategic planning can achieve. But beneath this polished surface lies a different story, a story that doesn't often make the headlines. As the economy soared, not everyone soared with it. While GDP figures rose and international praise poured in, cracks began to form. The cost of living exploded, inequality deepened, mental health declined, and the dream of a stable, fulfilling life began slipping further out of reach for many ordinary citizens. Singapore did indeed get crazy rich, there's no denying that. But the question that now lingers, louder than ever, is at what cost? To understand how Singapore became so rich, you have to go back to a moment when its future looked anything but promising. On August 9, 1965, Singapore was expelled from Malaysia and forced into independence. It was a small, resource-poor island, with a population living mostly in slums, no military, no significant natural wealth, and little global relevance. Many predicted failure. But Singapore had something other countries didn't. Lee Kuan Yew. He wasn't just a politician, he was a strategist. He saw potential where others saw limitations and acted quickly to transform the island's fortunes. One of his first major moves was to make English the national working language. This was controversial at the time. Some saw it as a betrayal of cultural roots, but it turned out to be a It made Singapore instantly accessible to global investors, connected it to the international economy, and laid the groundwork for it. To become a hub for trade and finance, the second key decision was to bring in foreign expertise rather than keep the doors closed. While other post-colonial nations turned inward, Singapore did the opposite. It welcomed skilled workers, foreign companies, and global partnerships, building from the outside in. And finally, there was a zero stance on corruption. Lee understood that no country could prosper if its own leadership couldn't be trusted. By paying politicians well and enforcing strict rules, he built one of the world's most efficient and transparent governance. These three decisions, English, openness, and integrity, became the foundation of Singapore's rise. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't immediate, but it worked. Over time, the country became known not just for its efficiency, but for its ability to punch far above its weight in the global economy. A nation with no natural resources had turned its people into its greatest resource, and the world took notice. By the 1980s and 90s, the effects of Singapore's early decisions were becoming clear. Foreign investment flooded in, global companies set up regional headquarters, and Singaporeans, now highly educated and largely bilingual, were ready to take on high-skilled jobs in finance, technology, and professional services. The island that once struggled to provide clean water for its citizens was now emerging as a critical node in the global economy. This wasn't accidental. It was the result of a system engineered for efficiency and productivity. Singapore built a world-class education system designed to sort students based on merit and maximize output. It streamlined infrastructure, cutting red tape, and ensuring that business could thrive. And it heavily invested in its reputation, cultivating the image of a clean, safe, and reliable place to live and work. The population grew rapidly. People felt secure, they were willing to start families. Immigrants came in large numbers, drawn by generous work visas and a booming job market. Singapore was no longer the underdog, it had become a brand of success. But in the background, something else was quietly happening. As the economy grew larger, life was also becoming more intense, more competitive, and more expensive. For a long time, the benefits of growth seemed to outweigh the downsides. But the seeds of inequality, overwork, and social pressure had already been planted. And eventually, they would start to grow. For decades, Singapore's success story dazzled the world, but beneath the numbers, daily life for many Singaporeans was becoming more difficult. The first sign that something was wrong was the rising cost of living. In a country where nearly everything is imported, prices have always been high, but in recent years, they've skyrocketed. Essentials like food, transportation, and medical care have become increasingly unaffordable for lower and middle-income families. Yet these struggles remain largely invisible. Poverty in Singapore doesn't look like poverty in most other places. There are no sprawling slums or tent cities. But that doesn't mean hardship doesn't exist. A 2018 study by the National University of Singapore found that 12% of households don't earn enough to meet their basic consumption needs, and over a quarter of households fall behind the national living standard. At the same time, inequality has quietly widened. The rich have continued to benefit from economic growth, but average Singaporeans are finding it harder to keep up. With rising prices and stagnant wages in many sectors, the gap between aspiration and reality is growing. Singapore's model worked. But it worked so well that now, many people can no longer afford the life it promised. And this financial pressure is just the beginning of what's become a much deeper problem. Perhaps the most immediate and painful symptom of Singapore's success is its housing crisis. For a long time, this wasn't the case. In fact, housing used to be one of Singapore's biggest achievements. In the 1960s, when the country was still finding its footing, the government established the Housing and Development Board, or HDB, to address mass housing shortages. The plan worked. High-rise public housing units were built rapidly, transforming the urban landscape and giving the majority of citizens a safe, clean, and affordable place to live. Today, over 80% of the population still lives in HDB flats, but the dream is no longer what it used to be. As the population has grown and land has become more scarce, demand for housing has surged, far outpacing supply. Prices have risen sharply, especially on the resale market, and many young Singaporeans are finding that owning a home is no longer a realistic goal without help from family or a fair above-average income. The situation has created a growing class of people who fall through the cracks, too well off to qualify for public subsidies, but not wealthy enough to afford private homes. They're called the sandwich class, and their numbers are rising. In 2022, rental prices hit record highs, with some residents spending over 70% of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. Singapore now has one of the highest property price-to-income ratios in the world, even higher than Hong Kong. And as space continues to run out on the island, the pressure only increases. A system that once lifted people out of poverty is now pushing them toward financial instability. The foundation of Singapore's social contract, that hard work would be rewarded with a home and a better life, is starting to crack. Behind Singapore's economic engine lies a workforce that is constantly pushing itself to the limit. From a young age, citizens are told that success is earned through discipline, sacrifice, and relentless effort. This idea wasn't accidental. It was built into the system. Lee Kuan Yew emphasized hard work as a civic duty, and over time, that belief shaped the national identity. The result is a society driven by what's known as kiasu, a uniquely Singaporean mindset that translates roughly to fear of losing out. It's the need to stay ahead, to outperform, to never fall behind. And while kiasu helped drive achievement and national pride, it also came with a steep cost. Students are streamed into different academic tracks as early as primary school, setting them on predetermined paths based on test scores. Those who don't make it into top-performing groups often internalize a sense of failure, not just in school, but in life. The pressure to succeed academically, paired with limited social mobility outside of that system, fuels anxiety from childhood into adulthood. In the workplace, the story isn't much different. Long hours, high expectations, and an unspoken rule that rest is for the weak. A recent survey found that over 40% of Singaporeans would consider quitting their jobs for a better work-life balance, and about 1 in 4 are dissatisfied with their current employment numbers, significantly higher than in neighboring countries. This stress doesn't just disappear when the workday ends. Mental health challenges are on the rise, especially among young people. Around 16% of children and teens show symptoms of depression or anxiety, a reflection of a society that equates personal worth with performance. Singapore's workforce may be one of the most efficient in the world, but many are now questioning whether the price of productivity has become too high. As the pressures of modern life mount, another consequence has quietly emerged, one that threatens the long-term future of the country. Singaporeans are having fewer children than ever before. In fact, the country now has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, barely ahead of South Korea. At the heart of the problem is a simple equation. Raising a family in Singapore has become too expensive, too stressful, and too complicated. The high cost of housing alone often forces both parents to work full-time, leaving little room for family life. Add to that the intense educational competition, long working hours, and cultural expectations of success, and many couples are simply deciding not to have children at all, or delaying it so long that they end up having fewer than they originally planned. The government has tried to respond, rolling out incentives, cash bonuses, and grants for new parents. Campaigns have urged people to marry younger and have children sooner. But these policies haven't moved the needle much, because the issue isn't just financial, it's cultural. The pressure to succeed, the lack of time, the fear of failing as a parent in such a demanding society. All of it makes the idea of starting a family feel more like a burden than a joy. And while this may seem like a personal choice, it's quickly becoming a national issue. A shrinking population means fewer workers, fewer taxpayers, and a heavier burden on the next generation to support an aging society. In a country that built its success on human capital, running low on people could be its biggest challenge yet. Singapore's rise is nothing short of extraordinary. From colonial backwater to global powerhouse in just one generation, it's a story taught in economics textbooks and envied by nations across the world. But behind every great success lies a set of trade-offs. And for Singapore, those trade-offs are becoming harder to ignore. Yes, the country got rich, incomes soared, infrastructure flourished. But in the pursuit of perfection, something more human was quietly sacrificed. The sense of ease, of balance, of living a life not constantly measured by metrics and milestones. That's what many feel has been lost. Inequality now runs deeper. Mental health is in decline. Families are shrinking, and young people are questioning whether the future they were promised is really worth the cost. The very systems that built Singapore's greatness, streaming, meritocracy, competitiveness, are now the ones many say are holding it back. It's not that the model is broken. It's that it's exhausted. A country built to win is now struggling to rest. And unless these deeper cracks are addressed, the foundation that once seemed unshakable may begin to falter. Singapore got crazy rich, but what it lost along the way might turn out to be just as important. Singapore's journey is a lesson for the world. That progress always comes with a price. And while the island nation continues to stand tall on the global stage, the question now is not just how high it can climb, but how well it can take care of those it leaves behind. Because true success isn't just about what a country builds, it's about what it chooses to protect. If you found this story insightful, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the untold sides of global success stories.